everyone. This is Building Coastal Resilience, Norfolk's Comprehensive Resilience Strategy. Our webinar speaker today is Kyle Spencer, who is the Chief Resilience Officer for Norfolk, Virginia. I was just talking about how Norfolk is a really amazing cultural place and then also a really dynamic place from a water perspective. So really excited to hear from Kyle about how they sort of view and how they manage resilience in the city. My name is Susanna Foe. I'm one of the founders and the COO of Forerunner, and we are hosting this webinar. I will be moderating the Q&A as well as giving a brief intro. All right, let's get started. I'll start with a brief introduction. Those of you who have come to our webinars in the past have probably heard me say this a million times, but just some housekeeping. Everyone always asks if the presentation is being recorded, and it is. You'll note that we are using StreamYard today, so feel free to give us feedback on whether or not you like it. It's a bit of an experiment for us. But we will share the recording via email after the webinar, as well as I think the presentation. If you have any questions, please post in the chat. I see all of you using the chat, so hopefully that works well for us. What I'll do is I'll gather up all the questions at the end after Kyle's presentation, and then I'll ask him verbally. We're offering both 1 ASFPM CEC as well as excitingly 0.1 ICC CEU for attending. So there's going to be a post-attendance survey. One of our team members, Ashleen, is going to post a link in the chat. So grab that guy and then fill out the post-attendance survey, and we'll make sure that you get those credits. And then if you have any questions that weren't answered or you think of one later, please feel free to reach out with additional questions. All right, so let's get started. So those of you who have attended some of our webinars before are probably familiar with Forerunner. I like to give a little bit of context into our webinars more broadly before we start. As I noted, I'm one of the founders of Forerunner. We are a software company, and we have the privilege of working with over 160 now communities across the country, ranging from cities to counties to state agencies. It's a great privilege for us. We also get to learn a lot from all of you. I know some of you are sort of in the audience. And we started hosting these webinars as a way to share that knowledge more broadly. You know, we meet people like Kyle, who's doing amazing things in Norfolk, and we hear about what he's doing, and we're really excited to bring him on to share what he's doing with you. If you're not familiar with Forerunner, we are a software company. We started out in floodplain management and sort of supporting floodplain management for our partners. We really expanded our work to touch upon resilience workflows more broadly. So we like to say that Forerunner empowers government agencies to do more. And so we touch upon floodplain management, but also emergency management, grant management, code enforcement. You know, when talking about resilience, you know, we know that all of these things are very intertwined. You know, it's not just about sort of how we respond to hazards after events, but then also how we prepare for them, how we sort of manage our built environment in the meantime. So that brings me to introducing Kyle. We are really excited to hear from him on his work in Norfolk because it is so dynamic and because the work of resilience is so hairy and so interesting. So Kyle Spencer has been with the city of Norfolk for quite a while. He's been the Chief Resilience Officer for the past 3 years and served as a Deputy Resilience Officer before being the Chief Resilience Officer since 2018. And he's worked actually with the city in other capacities even prior to that. So he has a lot of knowledge about the city and also a ton of experience in resilience. His primary focus is implementing the city's resilience strategy by managing complex water management, environmental urban planning, and smart city projects. And so his spread is his reach is quite large. While with the city, Kyle has been collaborating with regional partners on resilience innovations to support research projects with universities and developing business solutions in the resilience sector by turning Norfolk into a coastal community laboratory, which is one of the most exciting parts of the presentation that he's going to be sharing with us today. And actually, a fun fact is one of the ways that we first met Kyle before we actually started working with the city of Norfolk is working through one of their sort of technology programs. That sets the stage, Kyle's conversation.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Hi.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kyle Spencer, Chief Resilience Officer of the city, and I just wanted to give you all an overview of the work we're doing down our way. And I'll try to get through this fairly quickly so there's time for questions as well. Uh, and I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So, the city of Norfolk has been working in this resilient space for about a decade now. We started out as one of the Rockefeller Foundation's 100 Resilient Cities. We were the third city in the world to identify a chief resilience officer position. And it kind of starts with this definition of resilience, which most of the 100 cities in the world doing this kind of adopted the same definition. And, I like to focus on this ability to grow, right? We always want to come back to a higher level than we were after these shocks and stresses. And so that's always the way we're looking at things. And through our strategy development, we came up with these three goals. We purposely didn't come up with a resilience plan with very distinct, sort of task and tactics. We wanted to keep them very high level so it could kind of survive the through time. And so it starts with being a coastal community of the future. That's really mostly what I'm going to talk about today in our approach to flooding adaptation. But we also want to create opportunities to take advantage of all the Department of Defense and veterans and folks that are coming out of places nearby here in Hampton Roads, in particular Norfolk, with the largest Navy base in the world, and just come up with new ways of doing things and use our city, as a living laboratory to vet those types of solutions that we just can't come up with during our day jobs. And then Norfolk is, is the only city or the main city in the region that is dealing with concentrated poverty and the results of redlining, yellowlining, from back in the day. And so we've been working to break that apart and kind of undo some of those things. I'll kind of touch on those second two goals, or 2 and 3, and a little bit, and then I'll deep dive on goal 1, which I think is what most of you are probably interested in. So on the economic resilience front, it really starts with, these partnerships. So we're working with a nonprofit on most of this called Rise. There at the bottom is their logo. And that's a 501(c) that we helped create through a HUD, Housing and Urban Development grant. And so we're utilizing them to solve some challenges that we give them. We'll provide a challenge. They'll bring in companies and solutions, and we help vet those. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we've probably seen 100 or so companies come through. Probably 30 of those have been winners, 30 or 40 by now, and lots of new jobs kind of created in this resilience innovation space. And so you'll hear me bring up Rise quite a bit. On the neighborhood resilience, we're really trying to reimagine some of our public housing areas. They're very sort of concentrated and isolated from the rest of the city. So we want to connect them more to amenities and places that are difficult to get to right now. So that's connecting them from a transportation standpoint, connecting them to the environment more, and creating more green space and open space for them to become stewards of the environment and the landscape, where they're just not really exposed to a lot of that in their current situation. This is a picture of an area that we are in the process of redeveloping and using some of the techniques we've learned from the Dutch, where we're trying to daylight historic creeks. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And so that's the neighborhood resilience side. We actually create a whole department to focus on this now. And we're supporting them on these efforts kind of more in the background now. Okay, so to get into the flooding, Norfolk is challenged with lots of types of flooding. We sit at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. We've got water on 3 sides. We're highly urbanized. There's about 95% built out, so we have a lot of runoff. We're seeing more rainfall coming out of the sky. We're seeing more frequent storm surge, and of course, we're susceptible to relative sea level rise. We have the highest rate of relative sea level rise second highest rate to New Orleans on the East Coast. And so it's a top of mind issue for us. And I like to put these sea level rise curves there on the left to show that, we have basic planning uh, levels that we look at sea level rise for, but we really don't adopt a specific one because a lot of times we have to align ourselves with a federal partner. These projects that we're working on are super expensive and big, and we need help doing them. So you basically just have to kind of align uh, yourself to the color of money, so to speak, right? So if we're working with the Corps of Engineers, we've got to use their curve anyway. By policy, they can't use our own curve that we come up with, or another agency like the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, which is what the state relies on, et cetera. So I just kind of put that out there, but we use a lot of data to come up with our solutions, and the data doesn't lie. We're seeing it in places like we have this area called the Hague where we've been measuring for a while how many times the bulkhead is breached, and some folks at ODU, Old Dominion University, are kind of looking at that for us, and we're just seeing the exponential increase of that phenomenon. And this is a lot of times just blue sky flooding. It's not storm related, and this is what we mean by that. It's impacting our transportation systems. You have to get off the ferry and roll your pants up, take your shoes off, and carry them to get to work sometimes. And this is just, you can see from the images, there's no storm associated with this. This could be like a king tide type of event, full moon, maybe the wind's blowing from a northeast direction for a couple of days, and the water kind of stacks up and has this cove effect within our water bodies, and it just bleeds out into the street, either over the bulkhead or through the storm drain system. And so we've identified this problem. We've known, we kind of know about it anecdotally, but we're beginning to measure it more with sensors and other things, and coming up with solutions that can help us in the long run. And when you look at the storm events themselves, if you take the highest 25 water levels at the NOAA tide gauge that's within our city, you can see from this graph that more than half of those of the 25 have occurred since the year 2000. So just in the last 25 years, we've seen more high tide storm surge type of events than we have the previous 70 when that tide gauge was installed. So we're seeing it increase. We know it's happening. And I could probably even update this chart. I'm looking at it now where, it's last time I looked at it was 2023, but I'm only picking things above 4 feet, because around that 4 feet where the orange line is where the city has to take action. We have to potentially close a road, or maybe we don't pick up trash in certain neighborhoods that day if it's their trash day, because we don't want them trash floating around the city and clogging drains up. So this is where we start to take action around that 4 foot. And so that'll lead to, that level will kind of fold into my conversation in a minute about how we're implementing projects and when we would start triggering those systems to take action and go into place, like a tide gate or a surge barrier. We're an old city. We were originally founded in the early 1600s, and one of the things, my background's in GIS, so one of the things I used to do a lot is find these old maps and digitize them and georeference them and trace out the shorelines and show how that looks with today. And so if you look here, you can see today's map in the background. The black line is from the shoreline over there in the small inset map, and I just kind of inundated with some LiDAR showing what like a +6, which is not really a bad storm. It's maybe a 10-year kind of storm event. And, the flood follows where we filled in these creeks. So we filled in these creeks back in the 1800s, 1700s, early 1900s without an engineered fill. And so those areas are settling down faster than the natural ground around them does. And so that's basically, water sort of has a memory. It's going back to where it used to be following that old floodplain. And this is essentially the floodplain now in our city on our flood insurance rate maps. Over the years, I've developed some applications. I used to run our GIS department, and we developed a tidal tracking application we call Titan. We like our acronyms. We also created a storm application to track storm damage. But Titan will read that tide gauge I talk about and show anywhere in the city in real time how deep, not just where the water is, but how deep it is in 6-inch increments. And it's only showing tidal, so it's not showing rain, but we've come up with some other solutions for that. But this was an early project I worked on about 11 years ago, and we use it pretty much all the time now for planning purposes. You can choose different water levels, or you can just read it in real time. So you can kind of see what a 3-foot sea level rise would do to the city, and kind of inundate the city, and use it as a planning tool in that way. But we've been, these are all just sort of for situational awareness and again, tracking damages. We're big into open data in our city. We've got open data platform where we publish our own city tide gauges that we've installed about 15 years ago. And, I know a lot of academic folks use these for their studies, and we're using them to, to help design projects along the waterfront and develop our own localized water levels for those bulkheads or flood walls, whatever they might be. So this is all, online, and all these apps I've shown you are all publicly available. If you just search out Norfolk and those keywords, you'll find them. Over the years, we were, kind of in the smart city space. Again, I was in the IT department, GIS, and it fits well there, working with RISE to develop low-cost sensors. That was one of the challenges we gave them. How do we get a sensor that's only a few $100 that isn't the end of the world if it gets damaged or stolen or something, and it can give us enough information to make decisions on. And that led to a work with Homeland Security and an SBIR program they had, where we were helping them sort through 3 contractors that were developing those low-cost sensors. I work a lot over the years with Virginia Institute of Marine Science and the StormSense project, which is a hydrodynamic model that is started in Norfolk, but it's grown now the whole region. So it's kind of like Titan, but for the entire region, and we forecast up to 3 days ahead of time with that program, and that's kind of a neat thing that didn't really exist anywhere else until we kind of created it there. And I work a lot with folks like UVA, ODU, and other universities, helping PhDs and master's students with data and information and problem sets that they can help solve and get, their credits and thesis using Norfolk. And that's very rewarding kind of work, seeing those students take our city to different National Science Foundation's efforts and other things. The other thing that in that space, and this is really the first real example that we did with RISE, where we gave them this urban mobility challenge. I was installing sensors and seeing folks telling us in the Waze app. So Waze has a program for cities. It's free for cities to join, and you can collect the data from Waze users, and you can publish data as an authority into the Waze app. And so we joined that a long time ago, and I was seeing where my sensors were the same time and duration, the flooding being reported by drivers, and I wanted to reverse that and tell them it was there before they got there, and then eventually close a road. So we within the app, so that you could drive around it. And so we put that challenge out there. A company called FloodMap was the winner, and sort of working through the validation and calibration of that app, we ended up entering into a contract with them. So now we have this tool available, and this is an example where this road along the waterfront is flooded, and so I did a route in Waze to get me to a location on the other side, and it routes me around the flood now. So I can avoid that. I can get to my soccer practice or doctor's appointment. It's, we don't want you driving around in a major hurricane, but this is sort of helping us adapt to that day-to-day nuisance type flooding I was just talking about. So that's an exciting tool. And then also with RISE, we put out other challenges related to flood insurance, and so our planning department has been working with Forerunner, our host today, to help us manage our first floor elevation certificates and help QC some of those, and working, with providing some public portals and dashboards for our emergency managers and floodplain managers. And this is all, driven by the new technologies that are around today. Both FloodMap and Forerunner, I think, are using, AI machine learning techniques, and that's the kind of thing that we want to be doing as well, is finding solutions that are using the latest and greatest technology And so our planning department and floodplain administrator has been working with them, and they have a contract together to help us manage all those systems that we're required to under the National Flood Insurance Program. It also helps with our CRS stuff. And I know Forerunner is helping them package our CRS work each year to keep us certified. We are a Class 5, which is fairly rare for a coastal community. And a few other projects we're working on, we hopefully will get to a Class 3 or maybe a Class 1. And those are all saving folks money on their flood insurance premiums. And so if you have a policy in the city, right now you're getting a 25% discount, and it's all because of work like this. Another program we developed here in our office is what we call Retain Your Rain. We want everybody to flex their own resilience muscles and do their part. So I created an app that you can click on your house. It'll tell you how many we converted to bathtubs, but how much water is coming off your roof, and what, sort of what you could do about that. I converted to bathtubs because a lot of folks can't really imagine in their head what 2,000 gallons of water is, but you could picture 10 bathtubs laying in your backyard. The bathtub's about 50 gallons in the U.S. So just kind of doing that translation for them, putting in real terms is helpful, and then they can go through a decision tree program. Again, Retain Your Rain. You can click on your house. You can say, I want to do something about it. Kind of starts with whether you have gutters or not. And so if you have a gutter, you can probably do a rain barrel or something like that. And so we developed a book, a pattern book or a guidebook that gives you 10 home projects you can do at your house with varying degrees of complexity. Rain barrels are kind of do-it-yourself kind of stuff, but green roofs or pervious pavers, you probably need contractors and things like that to help you with. And then we have a whole big appendix about native plants and everything from trees to flowers and grasses. So that's online, and we encourage folks to use that in our city to help capture the water where it's falling, soak it in if you can, and slowly release it into the system. Every little bit kind of helps the stormwater system, which is we're an old city. It's pretty undersized, and so to speak, in today's terms. Many of the pipes are almost 100 years old. We've worked through some other sort of startup kind of companies. As a startup in residence program we did, where we were showing you can type in your address and kind of emulate what a flood event would look like, and then lead you to some resources to help you understand what flood insurance would do for you, and different measures you could take on your property to help with that. It's been challenged a bit now, but with risk rating 2.0, but we still encourage people to use the tool. Okay, and so those are all kind of like the individual level or their smaller scale. I'm going to start transitioning now into like the bigger neighborhood and citywide scale efforts, and so it kind of starts with these guidelines, right? You've heard me talk a little bit about using the best data and retaining and storing and draining slowly, but just to highlight a couple more, we want to layer public benefits. We want these flood prevention measures to be more than just that. We want them to be amenities in the community and provide other benefits beyond just the flood protection. And so these are some of the things we worked out through an exercise called the Dutch Dialogues that we did about 10 years ago. And we brought in these experts from Holland and New Orleans and other places that have been doing this longer to help us kind of reimagine and rethink how we're gonna do this. We came up with these values that our solutions are intended to be based on. And again, these themes are kind of throughout everything. We want them to be innovative and sort of adaptable or agile, and be integrated into all the other systems of our city, the transportation systems, you name it. And we're an old city, so we have a lot of historic districts, and we want to make sure that we're keeping those things folded into our designs and solutions. And so what this kind of looks like at the neighborhood scale is you have a ditch that's just kind of like an eyesore. It's a maintenance kind of problem. It's got mosquitoes, and everybody kind of turns their back to it. Their houses are facing the road, not this thing. And what we're starting to learn and try to do through various techniques is reverse that a bit and use that space as an amenity in the community, provide public access, connect people to the water, and at the same time we're reducing flood risk, of course, but it's sort of a different way of looking at how our communities are going to thrive into the future. And so these are some of the things that we're trying to implement now. And some of the projects we're doing that on, we've just completed the top left one. I'm going to show a bunch of pictures of that. And I'll kind of go through those quickly to be mindful of time. But it was a big $120 million grant from HUD through the National Disaster Resilience Competition. And we took about $5 million of that and created RISE. So, kind of the first time using HUD money to do, kind of this resilience innovation living laboratory model. And then we implemented a project in a historic neighborhood and a public housing neighborhood. They were side by side. And then we're using these spaces to connect them to each other, stop flooding at the same time. But we also take advantage of other grant programs like brownfield grants and use those to buy down environmental risk. And then our biggest project right now we're working on is with the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's called a Coastal Storm Risk Management Program. And we're working on a citywide coastal protection system with them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. So the Ohio Creek project, this was, construction started in actually February of 2020, right before COVID changed everything and made this super challenging and complicated, even though, not that it wasn't already enough, but it's, I got some of the numbers here on the right. You can kind of see we've built flood walls, levees or earthen berms, living shorelines, and, lots of wetlands and other things we enhanced. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but we daylighted that creek there on the right. It used to just kind of be boxed into a culvert and would flood this field all the time. It's now has under drains and the water's more of a natural system. We added a fishing pier the community wanted that, they said used to be there, got knocked out by a storm years ago. So we try to fold in these amenities with everything. This community is isolated kind of from the rest of the city, from the highway up at the north. There's only 2 ways in and out, and one of those would flood all the time. And so we've strengthened that entryway and exit and just made this a very resilient city, including adding a lot of bioswales and other things we haven't tried, like pervious pavers on 3 city blocks. I'm going to show you pictures of all that so you don't have to imagine it from this map. So, one of the important aspects of this is that it was a community-driven design. We had over 40 meetings with the public and had this feedback loop where we would ask them, what did you think about this, and what do you think we should change? We let the kids at the school nearby pick out the playground equipment, just try to, and we would come back after we met with them and show them what we changed based on that feedback. And so at each design milestone we had this going on, and so the design was pre-COVID, which was nice because we could have all these meetings, but then all the updates had to be done over virtual meetings, through the construction process. But it was overall like that was a big part of its success, is having the buy-in from the community in that way. Here's some pictures of those bioswales. So we haven't done this in the city at this scale before, but there's about 55 of these in the neighborhood. And the idea is the rainwater runs off and goes into these and kind of cleans out all the floatables and contamination before it eventually gets to the river, or just soaks into the ground there where it's at. And so we did a lot of those. We've got a picture here showing the shared use path. The old road, you can kind of see it on the far right, the upper corner, used to go through this concrete plant. It was kind of scary and dangerous for folks to drive in. You certainly wouldn't want to walk or ride a bike through there with those things pulling out and other people, kind of speeding through. So we did a land swap. And moved the road, raised it up out of the floodplain, added these shared use paths, created some wetlands, and it's just a much better space now than it was before. Here's a picture of the levee or the berm. And, again, it's these layers of defense. We've got oyster beds and reefs out in front of this rock revetment with a living shoreline with a nice slopes that's gradual so the wetlands can migrate with sea level rise over. Okay, living shoreline. Here's a picture of that berm or levee during construction, just so you can kind of see what those layers of soil look like. But kind of prevents the water from seeping through and all that, and protects that historic neighborhood in the background. It's on the National Registry. This is what the berm looks like, when the in the summer months, those are black-eyed Susans. They look beautiful. But until they start blooming, they kind of look like tall weeds and grass. So you can kind of see there's a missing patch there along the berm where a resident, didn't get the memo or whatever, but they ended up mowing it. But when it's left alone the way more natural states, it does look nice. And that's the idea, is that, the more stuff there that's not turf grass can help soak up water and reduce erosion and things like that. Here's a picture of the fishing pier that we constructed. This has been a big hit for the community. Every time I've been out there giving tours and things, folks are using it. I was just out there yesterday and somebody was out there fishing. The pump station we designed is integrated into the sort of the character of the neighborhood. It doesn't look like our other pump stations. There's public parking at it to get to the fishing pier. There's a little plaza out in front the community could use if they wanted as like a farmer's market. And there's even a little overhang where folks can come take shelter during a storm if they're caught out on the pier, charge their phone. And there's even a big window you can see the pumps and everything inside the pump station. And so that that was kind of a first time for us to do a design like that. It's another angle of that path out to the fishing pier. And then that road to the right is the 3 city blocks of pervious pavers. And the community came out on a cold February and picked out the bricks and the pattern. And then we constructed it there, as you can see, block by block for the community. And so that, those are allowing water to seep in between them and be stored underneath in the roadbed. And if it overflows, it goes into a storm drain to the pump. This is another angle of that picture. Here's that field I was talking about. So this creek there on the right used to be a box culvert and which was undersized and would flood everything around it all the time. So now we have it opened up to convey and control stormwater better, put some walking paths next to it, some trees and nice little shaded area. We've added picnic tables and barbecue pits and new playground equipment, basketball courts, under drains in the field, so it goes back to a playable surface quickly. It used to just kind of get muddy and soupy for a few days after a big rain. Now it's pretty much same day or next day you can be out there. And the walking path is up on top of the berm. Here's a kind of a picture of that a little bit farther along in the construction. Okay, quick transition to the big project with the Army Corps, and should be getting close to the end here. So this is the with and without project. This is the why I put the big box over Naval Station Norfolk, because the Civil Works Division of the Army Corps is not allowed to work on Department of Defense land, and so we just couldn't include them. But we are working with the Navy and other projects to make them more resilient, kind of outside the fence, and they are inside the fence. And so we came up with a solution that we've broken into these 4 structural phases, and then there's a home raising and basement filling non-structural program that are represented by the hatched areas and phase. So we're sort of starting in this, what we call the pre-construction engineering design phase of phase 1 down in that blue circle. And we're well on our way. We're finishing designs of the first feature and hopefully moving dirt this fall on moving the utilities to get going. Here's the timeline for that project. The moral of the story here is it's a long project. It's going to take us about 15 years or more to complete all the steps. And, there's a heavy amount of real estate requirements the Corps has that we're just not used to with other federal programs. And so that's part of the reason the duration is really long. But anyway, that's the general timeline that we're working with right now. So stay tuned. We'll be able to give you updates as that comes out of the ground. This is just zooming in on the first phase. We want to protect that community that is highly vulnerable in that public housing I was talking about north of the highway. And so this first feature will protect that. It's tied into the Ohio Creek neighborhood, which is also a low to moderate income neighborhood, and pick up from there, work our way to the existing flood wall built in the 70s. We'll come back and replace it, but we'll leave it there for now and work our way around the city. Everything in the orange color is protected by the red line. These are major employment centers, our core downtown. This is the hospital, complex in the regional trauma center and things like that. We also have a medical school there as well. So this is an important part of the project. And our first constructible feature will be kind of right here, and it's what we call phase 1A, where we're picking up from the highway bridge to the other bridge. It's kind of off the screen on the right, building out various types of features, levees, flood walls, pump stations, tide gates to complete this system. And it will provide a high degree of protection for us, similar to what the types of storms that have been recently hitting Florida and Louisiana area in the last several years. That's the kind of level we're protecting against is major storm events. But it also has benefits at the lower level storm events as well. The project is really expensive. It's about $2.6 billion. Looks like maybe the graphics cut off a little bit here, but it's not $6 billion. It's $2.6 billion right now. And our goal is to share that cost with the state of Virginia, like other programs like this have done around the country. And so our 35% share of 2.6 is around $930 million. We'd like to split that 50-50 with the state. So far, we've gotten about $50 million from this Community Flood Preparedness Fund and some state appropriations. And this is just an ongoing effort to identify the federal and local match funding, over the life of the project. And so that's can be challenging, especially in times like that we're in right now. Just to mention a few last things here, we do a lot of regional collaboration. We have things in our area called planning district commissions, and they help organize localities. Hampton Roads Planning District Commission is 17 localities, 7 cities, and then in Virginia we have independent cities, and then some counties that are on the peripheral of the core population area of the cities. But we're working with, again, RISE and other groups like nonprofits in this space, this environmental space. A few of those are on the screen, and national laboratories, just kind of anybody that wants to do work on resilience and innovative things. We will entertain them and use our city as that laboratory, give you a place to test it out, and help you vet it. The Department of Defense a few years ago created a new joint land use program. That's what the JLU stands for. These are typically done around accidents and noise zones for the jets in our area, but this is the first time they did one on sea level rise and flooding. And so we came up with a bunch of projects. And right now we're actually implementing the one on the left in the little box there where it says Lexington Avenue, Hampton Boulevard. That's a major thoroughfare to the naval station, the port, the third largest port on the East Coast, and our hospital. And so we're raising that road, putting backflow preventers in the checkmate valves in the stormwater system. And that's been funded by the Office of Local Defense Community Collaboration or Cooperation, OLDCC, out of the Department of Defense. It's a great program, and we're taking advantage of that for that project. The Hampton Roads region also has a projects tracker. You can, check out the website. You can probably just find it on Google easier than typing in this address, but it's just an ArcGIS online dashboard. Cities and folks like me send in what we're working on and different statuses of those, and they're just making those available in this dashboard format. And it's kind of a useful tool to help tell the story and really show the need, the unmet need. There's so many things we need help with, and there's only so many sources of funding and options out there. But this is a great storyteller. And the state is starting to catch up now. They've created a coastal master plan. They're working on a statewide plan as well, and an update to this coastal plan. So we're supporting where we can the state on those efforts. We continue to work with other academic partners and stakeholders, and trying to find different ways to get the best modeling and simulation, and using our city again as that living laboratory to help calibrate and validate those types of systems. And cities collect a lot of data. We have a lot of stuff. We're pretty open book. Well, if you ask, and usually if you ask with our department, you probably get what you're looking for. All right, with that, I think I'm done. Susanna, if you want to kick it over to more questions. Thanks.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you, Kyle, for that presentation. I think Norfolk is just like such a vibrant example of how you can approach resilience away. I really appreciate the um, the breadth of what you shared. And we have some time for questions. If you're like me and you were just dazzled by the number of projects that are underway in Norfolk and need some time to get your questions together, I got your back. I can ask a couple now, but feel free to drop some in the chat in the meantime, and then I'll prioritize those. But we'll start with a couple of mine. I guess my first question is, you talked about Norfolk as being a living laboratory a few times, and there are not a lot of places that sort of see themselves as a living laboratory, and so just really appreciate that notion that the city can be dynamic in a place where you experiment with like how to solution around things. I'm curious to know, from a public perception standpoint, like sort of how the public sees the living laboratory concept.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it. I mean, there are cases where there's like a physical thing in the ground or just, the street. I'm getting like echo.
Yes, I can hear it a little bit, but I can also hear what you're saying.
Okay, so and a lot of it though is like technology stuff that like we've done with you all and Flood Map and others. But I think in general, since we're not paying for any of it, so basically Rise funds these companies to come up with a solution, to implement the solution, and then we just spend some meeting time with them and things like that. So there's really it's kind of a nice deal. There's really no direct cost to us on the front end. Now, if we like the product enough, we can certainly purchase it, right? Cities buy a lot of stuff. That was sort of the idea when we created it. So in the cases where there are things physically out there, we don't usually get any negative feedback. They're just more curious types of questions, And then once they hear what it is, they're like, oh, kind of neat, that there's usually not a pushback or anything.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think we got a couple questions before you actually started the webinar, around, how do you make things work, right? I asked a question about that sort of midway through. But one question that we received was, would love for you to share some information on how you collaborate across organizations or with other departments for approval and implementation for work.
Yeah, so my department sits within the city manager's office. So our full title is the city manager's office of resilience, and that's kind of by design. That a lot of our job, I think, historically has been getting these different departments, to work on these really big, complicated projects that not one department would take on themselves. So we sort of see of ourselves as this broker or this facilitator to look at the big picture and figure out how to make a holistic solution. And so we have different like meetings and other ways that we're implementing that idea. And we, a lot of times that could just be simple things like, hey, we're working on this project and you need to, be getting ready for future maintenance, right? I don't fix a pump station. There's a department for that. But if we're implementing a pump station or building a new one as part of this grant or this program, we want them to be in lockstep with us so that by the time it's online, they've got enough people to support it. And so, it's that kind of stuff, and just helping think through, our budget process and all these other things that go into it. So I think that's why we're successful in this, is that we're just not tied to one specific department or portfolio. We kind of get to kind of not force, but get folks to kind of work together collectively and collaboratively on these really big projects.
Yeah, I feel like you do there's like a luxury to that position, but I also think that it is a very political thing for you to sort of get that buy-in and to sort of maneuver between departments and understand exactly how they're working. I guess there are a couple questions that are a little bit more tactical, sort of zooming in. The first one being, for some of the green infrastructure projects that you shared, how does maintenance get funded?
Yes, so that's kind of what I was getting at there is we know they're coming online. We want to make so right now they're technically stormwater features. They're regulated by our Department of Environmental Quality at the state, which is delegated down to us. But they need to be functioning properly for our TMDL credits, MS4 permits, and things like that. So it's sort of on them to do that. One of the other things that we've done in recent years is there was a grant program that we were successful at where we could hire these positions that were sort of neighborhood ambassadors, and they were helping keep an eye on things. In some cases, maybe doing some maintenance, um, but bringing in more community involvement and trying to get folks to take ownership of things as volunteers and as uh, as just sort of like neighborhood stakeholders. We have a lot of civic leagues. Is where the democratic process starts in our city, and if you can get a civic league buy-in, you can pretty much get anything you want done in the city. And so a lot of it kind of starts there. And those ambassadors that we're hiring now, we're implementing it, are going to those meetings and trying to get folks to buy in on all this.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I imagine you spend a lot of your time talking to people. We just have 1 minute left. I know you have a hard stop, so maybe we can just squeeze this last question in. In the meantime, I think Ashley from our team is going to put that post-attendance survey into the chat for you all to grab, just to make sure that we log your attendance. So last question is also a tactical one on building standards. Can you talk a little bit about the building standards? You alluded to this a little bit in Norfolk's floodplain. Specifically, are you using or planning to use the new ASCE 2020-24 flood standard?
So Norfolk is Virginia is a deal and rule state. So building codes are right at the state level. We do have control over zoning, right? So I think if the state of Virginia adopts or allows us to do ASC the new guidelines and standards, then we certainly would or will. From what I've read on those, we already kind of meet or exceed those standards on things like freeboard and other things. We've been pushing at the state level for many years to get building standards more resilient, right? Like, I mean, everything from wind speeds and roofs and other stuff. But I think it does require legislative action from the General Assembly in Virginia to allow some of that to be handed down at the local level.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this ranging presentation. Just really appreciated your time. And thank you so much for the audience's attendance as well.
Yeah, and feel free to share the slide deck if you want. I saw someone asked that question, they could get a copy.
Yes, we will be sharing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Have a great one.
Bye.